Looks like we're live, Brother Rami.
Yep.
I'm just going to do a quick check here to make sure we're good to go. We are indeed live on
X and YouTube. Yeah, just Instagram we're not live on, but that's a recurring issue we have.
It is a recurring issue. We'll figure that out one day. But in the meantime, hello everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. For some reason, Rami, I cannot see the comments. Show comments on stage.
I don't see any comments yet, so maybe people can...
That's very unusual, though.
It is.
Something is wrong.
Yes, we have greetings and salutations from Corinthia, Greece. Looks like all three of us are in Greece. Or different.
Hello, Alexander K64 from Corinthos. Pleasure to have you. We also have Megan McQueen, and from Canada. What part of Canada are you from, Megan? And we also have Nancy Luan. And Aloha. I'm going to assume that's Hawaii, but you never know. We have Lillian Keane from Australia, Psycho 133 from Poland, HCS 246 from South Africa, a friend Zinka 1972 from Zagreb, Regina Mund from Scotland. We have quite a global audience joining us. Jana from Switzerland. Maud Trudell from the Insane Asylum. I'm going to guess that's Canada, but you never know. We have Hisham Talib from Malaysia. And Stella K. I think that might be my cousin from London, Ontario. I hope, if that's you, cousin, hugs and kisses, but welcome. And we have a friend, lay personality from Toronto, and from Ohio's North Coast, Vegan Goddess, and also AMT 17 from Nova Scotia. So I'm gonna start addressing our agenda today because we have a number of subjects we want to cover. Welcome all. It's been too long since we last had a live stream. Someone just, Lillian Keane says, my sound is breaking up. Can you hear me clearly, Rami?
I can, but maybe it's on YouTube, the issue.
Okay, so just to be clear, my friends, I'm in my home outside of Kalamata today, and we had 5G installed here at my home for the very first time this morning. The internet connection up here has been quite poor for several years that we've been living here, but I'm doing a bit of an experiment today. I've not tried a live stream from my home because of the poor internet connection, but I'm hoping that the 5G is going to be fine. And if it isn't working out, I'm sure our friends in the audience will let us know. So, Rami, you are in some place that's playing a cool kind of jazzy lounge music.
Yeah,
One might in New York, but you're not in New York. Where are you, brother?
I checked out of my hotel and I'm waiting to take my bus to Constantinople. I'm currently in Smyrna, also known as Izmir for some people. I was previously, I don't know if we did a live stream since I've been out of Canada, but I had a quick stint in Paris, where we'll discuss some of my Paris news later on. But and then I did a few days in Warsaw on transit to my very hyped trip to Iraq. I should be in Iraq tomorrow at 5 a.m.
And we are going to devote some time to discussing your fascinating trip to Iraq. I'm so jealous that I'm not with you. But this has more than professional importance to you. This is, as you're going to be talking about later on in our live stream, this is quite personal. So before we get to that subject, there's a number of issues we'd like to cover. First of all, why don't we talk about what we've been doing this week? I myself, as some of you may know, managed through a strange confluence of events to gain access to a 2-day conference in Athens called the Mari Med 3 conference. It is the third annual conference of, I would say, Israeli, Cypriot, and Greek politicians coming together with people from the private sectors in those three countries to promote the Cypriot and Greek relationship with the genocidal regime. If you want to figure out how I got in there, which is, as I said, an odd kind of thing, you can watch one of my reports, but it was a fascinating and nauseating experience at the same time. And I managed to capture a great deal of, I was basically, the whole time I was there, was videotaping with my iPhone as discreetly as possible. I captured every speech almost in full. I'm going to do 3 reports about what I saw there. I've published 2 of them. The first report focused on commentary from the chief economist of BDO Israel about the oil and gas crisis. The second report, which I published yesterday, was the speeches of the government officials from Israel, Israel and Greece and Cyprus. And the final report, which I had hoped to publish today, but I'm going to end up publishing tomorrow. There's a lot of work remaining to be done, is about the bigwigs, the heavy hitters from the private sector who spoke at this conference. And I believe that is actually the most revealing commentary of all. But you can judge for yourselves. Rami, you have finally found the time to put together a fascinating interview that you did when you were in France a few months ago. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that? We haven't yet published it, but we will before next week.
Yes. So basically, every time I go to Paris, I make sure to stop at the grave of Jacques Vergès, one of the most iconic lawyers, and I think the one who really brings honor and pride to the profession of the legal profession. And while I was at his grave, I was like, man, I really wish I would have been able to interview him. He passed away in 2014. And it felt such a shame that, like, now that I'm in journalism and able to land interviews with people, that I obviously, due to the circumstances, was not able to interview Jacques Vergès. So while just walking through one of the many protests that happen every week or so in Paris, I had the splendid idea of interviewing the lawyer of Carlos the Jackal. Since right after Jacques Vergès kind of split off with Carlos, Francis Villemain took over the Carlos case. And I felt like it was my way of honoring Jacques Vergès to interview him. So I interviewed Francis Villemain. He was the lawyer of Carlos the Jackal, as well as the lawyer of Maurice Papon, who was a French secretary of the police of La Gironde area during the Nazi occupation. And 45 to 50 years after the fact, France decided to try him for collaboration with the Nazi occupation and the deportations of Jews and resistance fighters during the occupation. But it seemed more like a witch hunt, since he followed the orders of Charles de Gaulle, which asked all the fonctionnaires, all the public servants, to stay in their position and to slow down the German machine by not doing a good job, but still doing the work that is required. And it seems like the people that went after Maurice Papon were the Klarsfeld family, which are deeply rooted in far-right fascism in Europe and, of course, Zionism. But you can discover more about this in our interview that we hope to publish this week. But I was also in Poland last week, and I attended the Victory Day commemorations. But there's a lot of historical revisionism in Poland, where, first of all, it's no longer a public holiday, Victory Day, the day where the Soviet Union liberated Europe of fascism, defeating the Nazis, waving the Soviet flag on top of the Reichstag. And right outside of the Soviet War Memorial in Warsaw, the city liberated by the Soviets, there were propaganda talking about how the Soviets did not liberate Warsaw, but it was just a different occupation, comparing it to Nazi occupation. And that's just the state of Europe right now. In Berlin, waving the Soviet flag, or the Russian flag is banned at the Soviet War Memorial. And it really makes you wonder how the Soviet went from saviors of Europe to now the demonized people, and basically replacing the Soviet victory with an American victory, although I'm quite curious to know what they did to contribute to the liberation of Europe. And also, it's important to mention as well that I had mixed feelings being in Poland as well, because it was a layover on my trip to Iraq, and Poland, along with Denmark and the UK, were the only European countries to be part of day zero of the U.S. invasion of Iraq in 2003. So it took 14 years for Poland to go from a communist country aligned with the Eastern Bloc to paving the way for NATO wars across Europe, and basically bringing the rest of Eastern Europe, such as Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, and all these NATO henchmen that are fighting America's wars.
So, Rami, a couple of people in the audience are curious to know whether you're French. Maybe you could just take a minute and talk about your relationship to French culture.
I'm born and raised in Montreal from Palestinian parents, and I also happen to have Iraqi naturalization in my family from my grandparents that were naturalized Iraqis. Although I don't really identify with like being Iraqi per se, I'm a pan-Arabist, so any Arab country for me is a form of national identity for me. But I'm going there to work on getting Iraqi citizenship through the documents that I was able to find of my grandparents being naturalized as Iraqis. I'm not French. It's a love-hate relationship with Paris. I feel like there's so many nice intellectual people. I like sitting down at cafes there and listening to other people talk, although it's mostly nonsense most of the time. And I mean, you often hear things about how the Chinese and Russians are not better than France. I mean, take care of your own government before accusing the Chinese and Russians of anything.
Yeah, it's funny you say that about your love-hate relationship, because you just got admitted to law school in Paris, Rami. So why don't you talk to us about that, brother?
I mean, I applied to law school. I feel like sometimes I apply for these side quests to keep myself busy. And I was debating whether I should actually do it. And I actually missed the deadline. And then, but I had paid, but like I applied. They responded to me saying that my file was not completed and that I had like 1 week to figure out my file. And I just skipped it. And then like a month later, they replied to me again being like, hey, you really need to fill up the missing documents. And I was like, but I'm already a month late. They're like, just do it. So I did it. And I applied at Sorbonne and Assas. And I put Université de Paris à Nanterre as well, which was I applied for Sorbonne, Paris 1, Paris 2, mostly because this is where Jacques Vergès had studied. And then I applied for Université de Paris à Nanterre because that's where the May 68 protests happened, although I'm a bit critical of May 68 protests. And then like I was getting rejected by my second choice, and then randomly got accepted to the third one. And I'm thinking that maybe settling in Paris, doing law school there could be good for journalism in general. Also, since it's so, I mean, like really the francophonie is so centered around Paris that like we could interview very interesting people just out of Paris, really. So for our French channel, it could be interesting. And I'll be treating that a bit as like it's because of you, Dimitri, and Jacques Vergès truly that inspired me to explore the legal profession. I think it's the journalists that did the best work are the ones that have a legal background, and I think it's because there's an analytical mind that comes to it when we analyze the facts on the ground. And I believe that there's also a possibility to represent people, the most vulnerable and the people that deserve it the most. So I'm just exploring this possibility. We'll see how seriously I'll take those studies and if I'll actually complete the entire degree. But for now, I'm just taking one day at a time.
So you've mentioned the name of Jacques Vergès a few times. Not everybody from especially your generation would know who Jacques Vergès is, although I have been aware of his incredible work for many years. Could you just take just a couple of minutes and summarize for us what you think the highlights of Jacques Vergès's career were?
So, well, Jacques Vergès became kind of notorious and viral after taking multiple cases. most notably the case of Klaus Barbie, who was a Nazi that was being tried, I believe, in Lyon. He took his defense, and in the interview with Francis Dumais, I talk about how Jacques Vachon succeeded in not getting the death penalty, although France had already abolished the death penalty. But I think what Jacques Vachon did well was ensuring that Klaus Barbie would be tried in France and not be sent to Palestine like some other Nazis were tried and found guilty over there. And I think some Nazis got the death penalty in Palestine or Israel, whatever you want to call it.
I never thought of that as being his primary achievement, though. I mean, I was always troubled by his defense of Klaus Barbie. Although as a lawyer, I readily acknowledge that everybody needs a lawyer, and in a system of due process, even the most heinous individuals should be granted capable legal representation. So, for me, what really grabbed my attention about him was he defended Algerian revolutionaries. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, so he ended up defending Jamila Bouhairid, who is the porteuse de bombe. What she did was she threw a bomb at a gathering of French soldiers in a cafe in Algiers, and she was tried and found guilty and sentenced to death. And Jacques Vachon knew that he would never be able to get her innocence through French courts, especially because the French court, at least at all, I'm sure it's pretty much the case right now anyways, but back then it's comparable to the Israeli court system where, I mean, if you're tried of quote unquote terrorism, there's like a 99.9% guilty rate. So as she was about to get executed, he launched a massive campaign across the world backing her acts of liberation, and through the intervention of the international community, through popular support around the world, they were able to commute her death sentence. He ended up marrying her, and I believe she's back in Algeria. He also took the case of Omar Haddad, a Moroccan gardener working for a wealthy French woman who was accused of killing the lady for who she was working for. And she had written on the walls, Omar m'a tué, with a spelling mistake. There was tué took a ER. And it was very curious that such a wealthy lady, so knowledgeable and knows basic French grammar, would make such a mistake. And it seemed like the whole purpose was to point the crime towards Omar Haddad. He took over the case and he was basically pardoned. He basically got pardoned by the King of Morocco or something along those lines. Anyways, it was a big success. He took also the case of the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia, of Khieu Saphan, who was the finance minister of the Khmer Rouge, amongst many, many other cases. For 9 years of his life, he lived in exile. No one knew who he was. And when he came out of exile, he said, it's very curious that in this police state that we're at, where we could track everyone's movements, no one knew where I was for 9 years. And also he took the case of Carlos Ilich Ramirez. Basically, his slogan is, his motto is, everyone has a right to a defense. And he has an amazing interview with Der Spiegel where they ask him if he would defend Hitler. He said, I would also defend George Bush. So
there was a very enlightening documentary done about him in the French language called L'Avocat du Diable, the advocate for the devil, or the devil's advocate, which, if you want to know about Jacques Vergès, fascinating, controversial figure. What I remember most about his defense of the Algerian revolutionary, whom he later married, was that he challenged the legitimacy of the French colonial court in Algeria. He stood up in court and told the judges presiding over the criminal proceeding that they had no legitimacy as the emissaries of a colonial court, which is very unusual to see courage of that magnitude in the legal profession, let me tell you. So in any case, let's talk a little bit about what's going on today with the Donald in China. That is a subject we wanted to cover. And we don't have too much to say about this, at least I don't. I'm going to focus on one aspect of this trip. The reason why I don't have too much to say about it is I think it's going to be a nothing burger. And the reason why I think it's going to be a nothing burger is because Donald Trump is going to China, first of all, in a very weakened and discredited state, in not only because of the catastrophic war in Iran, but also the utterly failed and grotesque Gaza peace board, the laughable negotiations over the Ukraine war. Remember, we were told he was going to end that in 24 hours. Here we are, I think 14, 15 months after he returned to the White House, and nobody's even talking seriously about the negotiations, or the so-called negotiations, to end the Ukraine war. The price of oil is rising rapidly. Inflation is soaring. Donald Trump's approval rating is in the gutter. And when you add it all up, he's going to China in a very weakened state. But I think the most important reason for having low expectations, which is I think what people should have for this trip, is that Donald Trump has proven himself to be agreement incapable. No agreement you do with the Trump regime can be relied upon, especially if it isn't, enshrined into U.S. law. But even then, it would be of questionable value. So I think this is something that is understood very well by the Chinese government, by all governments around the world, but particularly the Chinese and Russian governments and the Iranian government. This, I would imagine, is more of an attempt just to maintain a certain level of equilibrium in the China-U.S. relationship. I think from China's perspective, that's probably the best that can be hoped for. And by establishing a rapport with Donald Trump and his inner circle, they can minimize the risk of the situation spiraling out of control. Now, the thing that I really want to focus on in terms of this trip, and by the way, I don't know what happened to Rami. He seems to have disappeared. There he is. Hi, Rami. Okay, I just wanted to make sure you're still with us. The thing that I really want to focus on about this trip is this narrative that we're hearing and seeing in the Western media in particular, that there may be a trade in China between Xi Jinping and Donald Trump relating to Taiwan and Iran. And the suggestion I'm seeing over and over again in media outlets like the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Guardian, is that Trump may be willing to sacrifice the Taiwanese, or those who incline towards independence in Taiwan, in exchange for Xi Jinping strong-arming the Iranian government. I think this is nothing but hopium coming from the Western media elites and political elites, for reasons that I'm going to explain. They really want to believe that there is an easy way out of this crisis that doesn't involve major concessions to Iran. And so I think this is kind of like their Hail Mary. Send Donald Trump to China and see if he can, in their minds, I don't know if this is what Trump intends, but the commentariat seems to be very focused on the possibility that Trump is going to give up something on the Taiwan file in order to secure some magical solution to the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. And I'm here to tell you that that is not going to happen. That just ain't going to happen. And for a variety of reasons, one of which, of course, is that Donald Trump is agreement incapable. So even if the Chinese government were inclined to make such a deal, and I don't think they are, but even if they were inclined to make such a deal, I think they're intelligent enough to understand they couldn't rely upon it, that Donald Trump might later on. So for example, if Donald Trump says, hey, I'm not going to sell any more weapons to Taiwan if you force the Iranians to open up the Strait of Hormuz. Well, Donald Trump could just later on covertly or overtly sell weapons to Taiwan after the Strait of Hormuz has been opened. United States military has sent in its naval vessels and established defensive positions along the coast of Oman and the UAE or whatever. I think the Chinese government understands perfectly well that any deal of that nature would be completely worthless. But it's more than that. It's much more than that. I don't think anybody, including China's government, can force the Iranian government to open up the Strait of Hormuz. And by the way, it isn't completely closed. If you go to something, there are several websites where you can track in real time what's going on in the Strait of Hormuz in terms of the number of vessels that are passing through. And I'm looking at, in fact, right now, something called the Strait of Hormuz traffic tracker, and it's called the URL is Hormuz Strait Monitor, and it shows that in the last 24 hours, 12 vessels have passed through the Strait of Hormuz, and there are 6 that are currently passing through. So before this criminal war of aggression was launched, the number was up in the range of, I think, about 160 per day on average. So we're looking at, even at this level, of a reduction in excess of 90%. And this tracker, the Hormuz Strait Monitor, also discloses the current war risk insurance situation, and it describes the current war risk insurance status as extreme, a war risk premium of 5.5%. The normal rate, it says, is 0.15%. So the current insurance premium is 36.7 times normal, according to the Hormuz Strait Monitor. So why do I say that the Chinese government could never or will not try to secure an opening of the Strait of Hormuz? Because I don't think it can, first of all. The Iranian leadership understands that this is an existential threat to the country, to the nation, to the civilization of the Iranian people. And this is the strongest leverage that they have. And even if the Chinese were to say, well, look, if you don't open it, we're not going to buy your oil anymore, I still think they would continue to impose severe restrictions on the passage, because the cost of opening it up and giving up their greatest point of leverage is greater than the loss of oil sales to China. Secondly, I don't think China would want to sacrifice oil sale or oil purchases from Iran in a world in which oil is becoming increasingly scarce. Why would the Chinese shoot themselves in the foot by telling the Iranians, we're not going to buy your oil anymore? I think they're going to want to buy as much Iranian oil as possible while they can, because there is currently, and there is going to be, no matter what happens in the Strait of Hormuz in the days or weeks ahead, there's going to be oil scarcity for many months to come. They're not going to be able to restore oil inventories to current levels for a long time, even if the Strait of Hormuz were to be open tomorrow. So the Chinese, it's not in their interest. But I think more than that, it's also a question of principle for the Chinese government. What I think, they would say, what would we do if we were in this situation and we were confronted by an existential threat from two genocidal monsters like Israel and the United States? Would we give up our greatest point of leverage just because one of our allies, a strategic partner, tells us that it's in their interest for us to do so? No, they wouldn't do that, and I don't think they're going to require it or attempt to require it of Iran. The bottom line will remain, and I think that probably Xi Jinping will convey this to Donald Trump. I'm sure the question of Iran is going to come up, is that the only way to secure an opening of the Strait of Hormuz is for the United States government to make major concessions to Iran. End of story. There's no way around that. Any suggestion that this can be accomplished, the Strait of Hormuz could be completely opened while the United States maintains a blockade on Iran, retains the right to resume a war of aggression on Iran, continues to impose crushing sanctions on Iran, continues to freeze Iranian assets, continues to do everything it can to suffocate the Iranian economy. This is complete nonsense. It's delusional. Ultimately, Donald Trump is going to have to make, or his successor, perhaps it'll be another president, but somebody's going to have to make major concessions to Iran in order for the traffic through the Strait of Hormuz to be restored to normal levels. And I think that the Chinese government understands that perfectly well, and I think they're completely on board with that. As much as they may want to see the Strait of Hormuz opened, they're not going to try to, I don't think they're going to throw the Iranian people under the bus in order to save Donald Trump. That's my view, and that's really all I had to say today about this much ballyhooed visit of Donald Trump to China. What are your thoughts about that, or any other aspect of Trump's trip to China, Rami?
Well, I think we also need to look into the context of the upcoming midterm elections in the United States. Trump's approval rating is extremely low. Oil prices are through the roof, and we're also in a massive AI race, which with the country that reaches AGI first would win the century to come, possibly, right? Because you'd end up unlocking a level of intelligence and of surveillance of military capabilities that is exponentially stronger than the opposition or the rest of the world. So I believe that the United States is looking for ways to bring down the price of oil in order to be able to support all of its data centers, its AI research, and to be at the forefront of this technology before China is able to do that. Now, I don't think necessarily Trump will be successful at it, but I don't see it necessarily as a context of trying to compromise Taiwan for Iran, but more about maybe trying to get Trump's approval rating higher so that he could have a chance of winning the midterm elections, although I doubt that's going to go into his favor.
Looking pretty grim for the Donald right now, isn't it? Hard to imagine him winning, although I can see that they're gerrymandering the districts, the electoral districts in the United States like crazy, and the courts are giving a helping hand to the Republicans in that regard. But, one of the things that was so interesting about this grotesque Israel Love Fest in Athens that I attended this week was the presentation of the chief economist of BDO Israel, who talked about the current oil crisis, and what he said was effectively the only reason why there hasn't been a complete collapse of oil markets is because the major oil hoarders in the world have been depleting their strategic reserves. The Americans have been doing this. The Europeans have been doing this. China has a massive, by the way, strategic oil reserve, which is much larger than that of the United States and Europe and Japan combined. Amazing how much better prepared the Chinese were for this crisis, even though they themselves were not the ones who provoked it. It was the adversaries who provoked it, but they're in a much better position. But the West and Japan are in real trouble because they are about to run out of their strategic oil reserves. And then what? The last ships from the Strait of Hormuz have already arrived at their destinations. They take about 40 days or so to get to the more distant destinations. And the Strait of Hormuz has been largely closed for well over 2 months.
So natural gas refineries have been attacked, cutting down their production by 20%. So the real impact of oil prices, I don't think we've seen it just yet. It could get much worse before it gets any better.
Yes, and the oil price, the gas price in the United States, the current average is $4.53. It's almost going up every single day. So a month ago, which was at the height of the war, the average price for a gallon of gas in the United States was $4.12. So it's only gone up since then. As I mentioned, it's now at $4.53. The price of a gallon of diesel is at $5.67, which is close to the high. It was, a year ago, it was $3.54. So this is the United States, which is not nearly as desperate from an oil and gas perspective as Europe, Japan, Korea, and numerous other countries in Asia and Africa. Sorry, I seem to have had a problem with my internet. That's not good. It's supposed to be fixed. Anyways, can you hear me, Rami?
I can. I thought I was the one with the internet issues.
It might have happened on my end. In any case, again, any other thoughts, Rami, before we move on?
Well, I wanted to have your opinion on this possibly confusing situation going on X, where the Israeli Prime Minister office put up a statement saying that Netanyahu went to the UAE during the bombings while UAE was getting liberation strikes. I don't know what to call it, but liberation strike sounds pretty cool, by Iran. And the UAE came out with another tweet saying that this never actually happened. They're not aware of Netanyahu ever coming to the UAE, and those are just false statements. Have you seen those tweets, and what do you think about them?
Yeah, I did see them. By the way, remember when Netanyahu disappeared for a while during the war, and everybody was theorizing? A lot of people were theorizing that he was dead.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's why he disappeared, because he was in the UAE and had to find a way to get there that was secure.
Mm-hmm.
I can only imagine. Look, obviously the tyrants who rule the United Arab Emirates don't want people to think that Netanyahu came. They're denying that he came. So it seems to me he's doing this just to embarrass them, or I think more likely he is trying to incite Iran to attack the UAE again, because he wants the war to be revived. And he thinks that this is a way of doing it. Otherwise, I can't imagine why he would reveal going to the UAE when the UAE doesn't want people to believe that he visited the country at the height of the war. I can only, the only explanation that makes any sense to me is he's trying to increase Iran's hostility, provoke Iran to attack the UAE, so the war will be restarted. What do you think, Rami?
Well, I think there could be different possibilities as well. It could be also a provocation to Saudi Arabia to know that the Israelis are fully embedded inside the UAE. The United Arab Emirates, you can barely see it on the map when you compare it to the size of Saudi Arabia. I would be quite alarmed to see this level of deep integration, and knowing that the Saudi Arabian government will never be able to outmatch this form of alliance with Israel compared to the UAE. I don't know. It just feels like that the UAE would be seen as a legitimate target if this comes out as being true. The UAE also has to come out as some sort of, it has to keep faking support for Palestine, although we know this is all bullshit. And to know that Netanyahu, the genocider, bloodthirsty leader of the Zionist entity, visited your country, and that these are the people defending your country from Iranian attacks, I think it would lose a lot of legitimacy for the UAE at the face of the rest of the Arab world, and might push certain people to be a lot more wary of the Emirates. But I'm just curious, how do you feel about, do you agree with me that this puts Saudi Arabia in a very difficult position where in some way it could be losing the hegemony over the GCC?
Yeah, I think Saudi Arabia is in serious trouble. It has been exposed as completely vulnerable to Iranian missile and drone attacks. It is losing huge amounts of revenue as a result of the restrictions on the Strait of Hormuz. It is very clear that the United States either will not or cannot or both protect Saudi Arabia, and will always prefer Israel's security over that of Saudi Arabia. I think that there is a huge amount of discontent in the country. By the way, last year, according to Amnesty International, the Saudis executed more people than at any time in their history. I don't think it's a coincidence they did that during the genocidal war on the Palestinian people. They are becoming even more extreme and trying to suppress popular dissent. There was a poll done very early in the genocide which showed that over 90% of Saudis wanted the Saudi tyrant to cut off all relations with Israel. which in actual fact he hasn't done. So he's got enormous problems, the so-called Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia and the Saudi elite. And I wouldn't be at all surprised to see these regimes come down in the next, 3 years. Ultimately, if the peoples of these countries are going to be free and sovereign, I think they are going to need regime change. And this war might be the final nail in the coffin of these regimes if it continues.
But
so they're in real trouble.
Do you see a possibility where Saudi Arabia would kind of redefine its allegiances in the region? Maybe if it cannot outcompete the UAE with Israeli support, will it try to look for support instead from Pakistan and from Turkey?
Well, to varying degrees, both Pakistan and Turkey are themselves beholden to Washington, especially Pakistan. I'm skeptical that any of these regimes will ultimately seek a divorce from Washington, because they have been the only reason they've remained in power during all of this time, all of these years, despite their severe repression of their own populations and the outright theft that they have engaged in of the national resources, is because of the protection of the American military. They've been paid very, very well to be vassals of Washington. They have proven themselves to be utterly devoid of any human decency. So I myself, I don't ascribe to a view which I think is quite commonplace in the alternative media, that one or more of these autocracies may ultimately switch sides or at least become neutral. I think they're going to go down with the American ship at the end of the day. But I would love to be proven wrong.
Just because this when I was flying to Smyrna from Warsaw, there was a lineup at the airport of no less than like 1,000 just people lined up one behind the other, wearing this like very funny uniform, and it turned out that it was all Somali soldiers that were basically joining or entering Turkey for military training. And I looked deeper into this, and actually Turkey has a very large military base in Somalia. So this is why I was asking you about this Turkish influence over Saudi Arabia, because I think Turkey has deep interests in the Red Sea, and you're seeing it through this investment of military personnel in Somalia. We see Israel and UAE collaborating over Somaliland. So I know Turkey and Pakistan are deeply rooted with the Western sphere of influence and basically satellite states of the United States. But there's still, I believe, like a division at least between the two different currents within the West, the pro-Israel and kind of the pro-Turkey, which all serve the same people in the United States. But it expressed itself in a different way.
Yeah, I actually think if any state in the Arab and Muslim world is going to break with Washington, of those that are currently beholden to Washington, and most of them are, the one that's most likely to do that is Turkey. Turkey is in the best position to do it for a whole variety of reasons, and Israel is openly saber-rattling against Turkey in so many ways, including through its alliance. And calling it alliance is a bit generous. Its axis of evil with Cyprus and Greece, and the Israeli leaders are openly, identifying Turkey as a strategic threat. Naftali Bennett, who may well be the next prime minister of Israel, said that Turkey is the new Iran. So when you hear that kind of rhetoric, and there's problems, of course, with their relationship, the Turkish-Israel relationship in Syria, Lebanon. So a huge amount of hostility amongst the Turkish people for Israel, with good reason. So if one of them is going to break with Washington, I think it's most likely to be Turkey. But who knows? This is a very volatile situation, and I suspect there are going to be a lot of surprises along the way. And
just yesterday, you had debated, or was it 2 days ago? I forgot. This Kourakis guy, Kourakis, that terrorist, that war criminal.
The former spokesperson for the Israeli military.
How did that happen?
Well, for some reason, I think because of my trip to Iran, I was invited onto Mario Nafal's program. Mario has a large following on X. He lives in the United Arab Emirates. I understand he's of Lebanese origin, but I think he comes from Australia. And he invited me onto a program shortly after I left Iran in March, and then he's had me on numerous times since. And Mario and I don't agree on much. I'd say we disagree on much more than we agree on, including, for example, the UAE, where he lives. But my policy is when I get invited to do interviews, if somebody has an audience that might be interested in hearing what I have to say, and I'm not going to be restricted in what I can say, I do the interview, even if the person who's interviewing me is somebody that I don't agree with. So I appeared on his program a number of times, and then I got a message about 2 weeks ago from a member of his staff who said, "Would you be willing to debate people on our program?" Okay. Do you have somebody in mind? They said, "We'll get back to you." And then they came back to me a week later and they said, "We'd like you to debate the former spokesperson for the Israeli military, Jonathan Conricus." This guy actually was the spokesperson, I think, for the Israeli military from 2000 and, I'm not mistaken, 2016 to 2020, in that period. And then after the Al-Aqsa flood operation on October 7, 2023, he returned like the next day to become the spokesperson of the Israeli military again. And he remained in that position, I think, for the first 3 or 4 months of the genocide. So when they asked me this, I wasn't looking to debate the guy. I had no burning desire to do that, and I hardly knew anything about him. But when they asked me, I said, sure, why not? So we had the debate yesterday, and it went on for 45 minutes. And Mario started by asking me, Mario doesn't like Hezbollah. And Mario and I have had a number of disagreements about this. So Mario started the debate by asking me about whether Hezbollah is the aggressor in its conflict with Israel. And so I responded to that question without saying anything about Conricus. I just talked about Israel, and I talked about the history of Israel's aggressions against Lebanon. And then he turns it over to Conricus, and right away Conricus comes after me. He makes it personal the moment he opens his mouth. You have a sick pathological obsession with Israel. Why are you so obsessed with Israel? You hate the Jewish people. And at that point, like, I've been through this before. I had to deal with these personal attacks on countless occasions, and I've learned that when that happens, don't spend any time defending yourself. It's all nonsense. And if you spend time defending yourself, you're just going to end up not talking about Israel, which is exactly why they do this. They want to discredit you, but they also want to distract you from talking about Israel's heinous crimes. And my approach to this tactic is, when the Zionists come after you with these personal attacks, A, don't defend yourself, and B, go on the offensive right away. Just immediately go on the offensive. And so I told him what I thought about him. I said, you're a terrorist and a war criminal. End of story. And well, yeah, first he started making noises like he was going to sue me. And then I said to him, you know where you can find me? I would be more than happy to have a defamation lawsuit filed against me so I can prove in a court of law that you are, in fact, a terrorist and a war criminal. And he quickly changed the subject at that point. But that's it. I don't know whether it was ultimately a very useful exercise for the audience. I hope it was, but there was a lot of shouting.
How would you respond to people that say that such debates with these war criminals is a form of normalization?
This guy is all over, like, whether I debate him or not, he's constantly being given platforms. Like Piers Morgan. Piers Morgan interviews the guy. Nafal interviews the guy. Major American networks interview the guy. He is like a propaganda machine. He's constantly out there. So you can ignore him if you choose, but the fact of the matter is he's been given a platform, and he's been given an opportunity to influence a lot of people. So if somebody says to me, here's your chance to discredit this guy, I'll take it. I don't think anything that I said in that interview, you can watch it yourself if you want to, but anything I said in that interview could be conceived of or perceived as legitimizing him. But as I say, it might, how much of a difference it makes at the end of the day, I don't know. People can judge for themselves. So, well, all of that. Sorry, go ahead, Rami. I want to talk about your trip to Iraq, but if you have anything else you want to talk about?
No, I was just gonna say if it builds our audience by cross-pollinating from Mario's, then I'm sure we'll take it.
Yeah, there's that too, and we can expand the reach of our journalism by accepting these invitations. Absolutely. So you talked a little bit, Rami, about your personal past, your connections to Iraq. Could you tell us some more about that?
Yes.
And what does Iraq mean for you?
So first of all, tomorrow is the commemoration of the Nakba. 78 years since the expulsion of my Palestinian family and the families of 750,000 more Palestinians, if not more, that were exiled by the Zionist entity. And we recently, we did a live stream like a year ago, Dimitri, where I showed my grandfather's birth certificate, as well as a letter from the school where she was teaching at, acknowledging that he was forced to be displaced. That was in April, I believe, April 22nd, 1948. And at that time, of course, Palestinians were not aware that there would be such a concept of the Nakba, right? There was this deep belief that we would be back in no time, and we still have this deep belief that we will be back eventually. And my grandparents, if I understand correctly, went to Jordan temporarily before going to Iraq, where my grandfather was working in the banking sector. And I believe that was in 1952, I believe. And by 1954, or maybe even before that, my grandfather was granted Iraqi citizenship through naturalization. And that was, I believe at that time, a bit less common for Palestinians. Palestinians usually got naturalized as Jordanians. Jordan was able to offer citizenship to some people. There's a handful of Palestinians that got Lebanese citizenship, but Iraqi is one of the rarer ones. And my grandmother and my grandmother were able to get Iraqi citizenship. My dad ended up being born in Basra, Iraq, in southern Iraq. And then, due to the nature of my grandfather's work, he moved from one bank in Iraq to another bank in Lebanon, which is where my family, my father, my uncles, my aunts, as well as my grandparents lived most of their lives, was in Beirut, in Sin El Fil. And but when they were living in Lebanon, it was under their Iraqi passport, their Iraqi citizenship. Now, my dad only lived 2 years in Iraq. We're Iraqi by citizenship, but after the Iraqi unhinged and unnecessary attack on Iran, my family was drafted to go to war, just like many Iraqis of fighting age. And my father and his brothers, since they were living in Lebanon at that time, did not answer the call for many reasons. This is not an honorable war. You're not fighting the United States. You're not fighting Israel. You're fighting the brotherly Iranian people who just succeeded at doing a socialist revolution, taking down the Americans, liberating the American embassy. And Saddam's response has been truly despicable. So my family did not join the war. So what ended up happening, I ended up discovering this recently, is that Iraq refused to renew people's documents, passport, ID cards for people who did not join the war. So effectively, my father kind of became some gray area stateless. I mean, not really stateless because he had an Iraqi citizenship, but without a passport, without any documents being able to be renewed. So that's how we came to Canada. Now, my mission to go to Iraq is obviously journalism. So there's everything related to the defense of the Iraqi people against the U.S. invasion, the change of political situation in Iraq, with the right people taking more and more influence in this country, as well as try to reclaim my Iraqi citizenship. So I found the school my uncles went to. I found the streets my grandparents lived on. We found the certificate of naturalization of Iraq. And I'm going to try to claim my Iraqi citizenship, and of course interview people that can teach us more about the situation in Iraq and the ongoing resistance to Zionism and American imperialism.
Now, I'm trying to find it here, but unfortunately I can't seem to track it down. After this ceasefire came into effect with Iran and the United States, 2 weeks afterwards, actually, the Iraqi resistance issued a video of a military operation it was conducting. So people aren't talking about it, but as far as I can tell, based on the resistance Telegram channels, the Iraqi resistance continues to remain active throughout this period, albeit at a relatively low level. So you're going to be going into, a theater of the conflict where I think there's still ongoing military operations. So I know you may be leaving Baghdad at some point. You're not necessarily going to stay there, but this is, obviously a risky enterprise, especially because the full-blown war may erupt at any time. So we will be watching closely what you're doing there. Can you talk to us broadly what you hope to accomplish from a journalistic perspective while you're there?
Well, Iraq used to host multiple German soldiers, NATO soldiers on sovereign Arab Iraqi land. And there were some tweets coming out from the German Foreign Affairs Office saying that that they've evacuated all foreign soldiers from Iraqi soil. So I would like to document what decolonization looks like effectively, right? Mm-hmm. Not with these bogus European Union alliances. What happens when we kick out their soldiers from our lands? I would like to also document the impacts of the U.S. invasion of 2003 and how Iraq has been able to, in an agile way, reinvent itself and strengthen its alliance with Iran in order to defend their sovereignty from enemy to allies, essentially, right? That's over the last, 4 decades. This is effectively what happened between Iran and Iraq.
Yeah.
Although the peoples have had there was always a deep respect between the two. I, through some friends, connections, whatever you want to call it, I was able to land an interview in Karbala with an interesting figure. So I'm hoping to, Karbala is the land where Imam Hussein was martyred. It holds significant religious importance to all Muslims, but specifically to Shias. And out of Karbala, there are fatwas, right? Like religious rulings, obligations that Muslims should follow if they recognize the authority of the Grand Ayatollah Sistani. So I would like to document that as well. But I'm also open to hear people's ideas. So type in the chat if there's any subjects you think I should be documenting. There's obviously a lot more of things that I would like to talk about, but I believe it's not the right time. And that maybe while I'm in Iraq or after my trip, I'll be able to talk about.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if you can get inside the green zone in Baghdad. That would be.
This is a given, a no-brainer.
Yeah. When I was there in 2024, I couldn't get in. They wouldn't allow me in. So it would be especially interesting to see what the current condition of it is after the war, or at least a hot phase of the war. Okay, Rami, that's great. We're really looking forward to your reporting from Iraq. I wish I would be able to join you, but at some point, I'm sure you and I are going to meet up again in West Asia in the months ahead.
I need to run. I have my bus from Smyrna to Constantinople to catch my flight to Baghdad. So I need to run absolutely right now. And
Take care.
yeah.
Take care.
Talk soon,
It was
folks.
great talking to you, everybody. We're going to. Someone is asking if I heard about the Pope giving a maximum honor to the representative of Iran to the Vatican. Yes, I did. That was quite something. And I noticed that various neocons in the United States are freaking out about that. In any case, everybody, it has been a good seeing you all again, hearing from you. I've been watching the comments in the chat carefully, and many of you have been expressing good wishes and your thanks. It means a great deal to us. Love and solidarity to you all. And we will probably have our next live stream after Rami completes his voyage across Iraq. So for now, we'll be signing off, and we look forward to our next conversation. Peace out.